And maybe you're identifying another way to say the red thread of all my transitions. The transition from not loving yourself to loving yourself. Like in my 20s, I was deeply unhappy with myself. I did not like myself. And I showed up to my marriage, to my work, to my spirituality from this place of deficit. It was as if God used all that and a painful demarcation line to say, okay, if we're going to start from the ground up and reconstruct a life where you love yourself, let's start here.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to the next episode of the Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited today to have a really wonderful friend of mine. Again, local in person, and I love that. We have Zach Janicello, who is a wonderful friend. As I said, he's a transition master, been through many transitions in his life. He's an entrepreneur and an agency founder. And Zach, I'm really excited to finally get a chance to sit down with you over the podcast and not around the fire pit or out on the hiking trails or the other stuff that we do. So most welcome to Life in Transition podcast.
Thanks, bro. It means a lot that you're having me here.
Yeah. No, it's really great to have you. So what would you consider, like right now, when you're sitting here right now, and that's what it's about, authentic conversations, what is feeling like for you right now to be one of the most important transformational transitions that you've been through in your life, most meaningful? What's coming up for you right now?
I've listened to your podcast for a while, and I was thinking about that. And I think partially, I'm 34, so a lot of my transitions are pretty recent. There's not a ton of distance between me and them.
Right.
So in terms of like what becomes the most meaningful, I think time will help me know which one was the most powerful. There's been several. There's been, I transitioned career-wise, right? Transitioned out of the ministry. I've had spiritual transitions around my body and transforming that. Transitions in marital status, being married young and then going through a divorce and becoming single towards 30. That's been a big transition. And they all feel slightly connected. And there's probably more transitions if I thought about it for enough time. Most I'm not sure, but one that's especially meaningful, that divorce, beyond just the relationship ending, it was a trigger to change so much about my life. And it coincided with the transformation of my body. It coincided with spiritual transformations. It coincided.
So is it the red thread? Because you said something, it was interesting. I've never had that comment before, but you said they're all connected.
Yeah.
So what's the connector? Like, what's the red thread that you see that pulls through all these transitions that you've been through, and pretty significant transitions? Yeah. Even for a young man, if I say so myself.
I'll take young. I think partially they're connected just because of the time in which they all happened similar.
Okay.
Or at least the amalgamate. I'd say if I looked at my life now and my life in my early 20s, it's like a completely different human. It's almost like I don't know that guy very well anymore. And that's something I'm working on still. But I'd say the connection is, whether it be the divorce or the transition in my career or the spiritual transition or in my body, I went through this transformation where something clicked. I couldn't tell you exactly which one of those moments it was, but something has clicked in me where I am currently obsessed, is maybe not even strong enough of a word, to find out what I'm capable of in this life. What is my mind capable of? What are my hands capable of? What are the spiritual depths I can go to? I have become someone that is willingly embracing a lot of fear, unknown, and change to try and answer those questions.
Oh, that's beautiful. I mean, because I think there's so much power in that. And the thing that really struck me about what you said a minute ago, Zach, was I don't know the guy from 10 years ago or from 15 years ago. From my early 20s until now, I'm not even sure I know the guy. Yeah. And there's a lot of energy around that. So tell me more about that. What is it? Like, what's this distance? And
there's just lots of noticeable changes in how I carry myself, how I think about the world, how I interact with others. And I think over the last 5 years, we'll call it, this transitional period.
This liminal space.
Yeah, I feel like I've I've looked too much at my past self as this thing to get away from, to intentionally transform, because I didn't like a lot of it. I didn't like a lot of the results that guy got. Something I'm working on literally.
Did you also not like that guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm working on. You've actually been a help. I mean, you're one of my mentors, and just the communities I'm in, I'm working a lot now and trying not to dislike that guy, trying to appreciate some of the good, because I don't like the fact that I can't recognize him completely. It almost feels out of touch. Like there's a trauma shield of not being able to connect with the things that were important to me back then. And I'm trying to go back and rewrite some of those memories and be like, hey, it's not all negative.
Right.
There's a lot of really good attributes that I can be at peace with myself about.
Right. So what if we start with, what do you like about you now? What do you love about this man sitting across the corner of the table from me here?
I'm proud of the person I've become in dedicating myself to real authentic relationships and to being known. I was not always good at that. And I would lie, I would hide, I could manipulate in all types of strange strategies.
Sure.
Some overt, some covert.
Right.
But the thing I think that has given me rocket boosting power in heading towards authenticity has been to make myself accountable and vulnerable to other people in a community, right? You're one of those. We know lots of men that we're in communities like that. That I'm excited about, because it's no longer just me trying to shield myself and be my own arbiter of what a good man is. I feel something I'm proud of. So to answer your question more succinctly, my commitment to community, to being a good friend. I'm proud of myself for standing up for myself. For becoming someone that has opinions and isn't ashamed of that.
That's right. Yeah.
Who has a point of view on the world, who has...
which is just as valid as everybody else's.
Exactly. To allow myself to belong. To belong. I was actually talking to my dad about this recently. He was here visiting, and I noticed my dad, I think he won't mind me saying this. We were at Home Depot. I've moved recently, so we were at Home Depot 100 times. And you go around any aisle in Home Depot, you're going to run into someone.
Yeah, sure.
And it was like this almost deep apology. I was like, when it's your own dad, you notice it as more, because it's like, that's me. I have that same thing. I used to be the guy that would apologize for existing.
Right.
I want to stay out of the way. Don't want to be confrontational.
Right.
Don't want to impose my worldview or my thoughts.
Right.
And that's something I'm really proud of. Like, I'm okay being me.
You had to show up as you now.
And I believe I have something to offer to someone.
Right.
You know? And to stop being ashamed of that lets you walk through the world more freely and powerful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was thinking of this, I think it was yesterday morning, and I don't know who said this, but it said, once you start to trust yourself, life becomes a lot simpler.
Oh, man. That's so true.
Right?
That's so true.
Like, you know yourself, and then you trust I know what it was about was I had made some decisions, and then right after I made them, I was like, I wonder if that was right or not. And I thought, no, just let it be.
Yeah.
Trust myself, right?
Where do you think trust comes from? Trusting yourself.
It comes from...
Is it time? Experience?
No, all of those things contribute to it, but it comes from knowing yourself, what you said before. Like, if you allow yourself to be seen, if I allow me to see myself and then get past the shame, right? Shame is a lack of trust.
Yes.
Get back past the shame. Shame saying I'm bad instead of I made some mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Getting past the shame and see myself. And then, so I think that's a big part of it is knowing and loving myself. That's where trust comes from. And I think also part of it is recognizing that I'm not in control of the outcome anyway.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a certain way. Right? Like, I remember what it was is I had gotten up in the morning. I was inspired to reach out to some guys. I texted a couple guys about my midlife transition mastery that was coming up. And then I thought, oh, what if this blows it up? Or what if they get upset at me? Or whatever this stuff, whatever this stuff is, right? And I said, okay, it's okay. I'm okay. They're okay. The world is okay, regardless of whether they want to be a part of this or not, or whether they like me or not. It doesn't really matter. And to not have that arm wrestling with myself before actions or after, just trust and go and see what happens.
Yeah. You hit on something that has been core to my youth, which was shame, just wrapped in shame. This core belief that you're bad. A lot of that came from my religious background. living a little bit of a secret life too, keeping secrets that you didn't think people would like you if they knew about you.
Oh yeah.
And you kind of split your psyche in a way by hiding parts of yourself. And that's been a long journey. It's still a developing journey for me to wrestle with shame and to be fully 100% myself with everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
But the more I do that, the more I stretch myself to walk like that, and I have not done it perfectly.
Of course not.
I've learned
nobody does anything perfectly.
The trial of fire.
Right.
But the more I do that, the more comfortable I am in my own skin because I feel authentic. You know, authenticity, it almost seems like the medicinal balm to shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And to continue, right before we came on the air, you were talking about that recently you've been leaning into things that scare you.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing, right? Being authentic it's scary. It's never going to not be scary because the edge, if you're being authentic, you're always going to be up against edge.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you're leaning into what scares you, then you can also be authentic, right?
Yeah.
That's where it comes from, right? And I have those thoughts much less now than I used to, but I still have those thoughts. Like, well, if I remember I was talking with a guy about a job opportunity in a Christian organization. He wanted me to help out with something. It wasn't like, say, a job opportunity, but it wanted me to help out with something. I said, I'm afraid you guys will think I'm not Christian enough.
Yeah, I know that
right?
one. Yeah.
And he's like, well, that's actually part of the reason we're talking to you. And I was like, oh, okay. But
cool.
My 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have never said that up front. I would have said, well, let me see if they like me and let me see if this opportunity is a good fit. But then I get down a path where I'm trying to be somebody other than myself.
Yes.
So right up front, I'm like,
I've been so guilty of that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it, like learning to trust ourselves and not having the shame. And I think you talked about this split psyche that you feel like you have. How did that manifest for you? What did that look like? And because that's, making peace with the different splits, the different parts of us is a huge part of also becoming to trust ourselves and being authentic.
I always felt like I made my all my interest in things I was interested in, I thought of it like a pizza. Like there's 8 maybe different slices in it. There's this one version of me, different identities, at least from the outside.
Wow, even
right?
different identities.
I felt fine with them. I felt like it was all me.
Right.
But I'm a lot. I got a lot of interest.
Right.
I'm a pretty diverse guy. And I didn't think everyone else could handle that whole picture. I was afraid for them to see the pizza in mass would make me look scattered, schizophrenic, split. Right.
So you had slice friends, but not pizza friends.
And I had folks that knew the deeply spiritual Christian me, which is a part of me.
Absolutely.
And I had folks that knew the wild boy on the weekends, like machismo kind of vibe. And I had friends that were like my workout buddies that were into physical fitness. And I had friends that were into my like universalism and like my wanting to be at peace with all people kind of vibe. And I had a part of me that was an artist and a musician and a songwriter. And I had another part of me that wanted to make tons of money and be a successful business, right? So lots of ambition.
Right.
And I would get so nervous when my friend groups would intermix. Because one day, a couple years ago, I was like, I don't like the fact that when I'm bringing different friend groups together, I'm getting anxiety.
Right.
Why am I getting anxiety? And the more I worked through that, it's like I'm afraid they'll all see a new part of me that I've worked to craft and control away from them because I knew maybe they wouldn't like that part.
Right.
And that's kind of gross to say. I don't like that I've done that, but I've worked really hard to let all those pieces show in the right time, organically with the right people. Now, I don't feel dogmatic about saying, hey, you need to see this other part of me.
Right.
Like
No,
I
for
don't
sure.
force it, but I'm not hiding it.
Yeah. No, but and I know I've been through that. My hallucination is everybody does that. Everybody has different compartmentalized friends. And then you get married and they all show up at the same place. or whatever, something like that, right? And it can be really awkward and really beautiful. And one of the things that I love now, being in my 50s, like I remember at my 50th birthday party, thinking I never felt so accepted and loved in my life because I didn't give a shit anymore about all the different facets.
That's so sick.
I just let people see me as I am with all of my warts and all of my glory, because it's both, right? And to accept, the love coming from a lot of different places in my life. And that's really, it's really beautiful.
And, The hardest folks for me to feel safe around showing that whole pizza were the like more Christian religious folks. Because I had friends that were complete atheists or pagans or whatever, and they were fine with the part of me that was very Christian. Like I have Christian roots. I was traditionally brought up that way, and there's parts of that tradition that are just, they'll never leave me. I love it. But I find no threat in people that are different than me, and I actually enjoy it. It's stimulating. It's like a different view on the world. It broadens my faith. But I found a lot of folks that were in the tradition where I came from could not accept the other parts of me that had expanded out. Right. And so those were the ones I actually felt the most controlling of myself around. I felt the most like, and that may be all me, may have been projection. Maybe they could have handled it 100%. But my fear was that that's not acceptable to them.
If I let this part out of me in this context, I'm going to be rejected.
And I found freedom in doing that too. But so a lot of it was projection. But that's been the growth step in trying to unify the split psyche. Of
to let everybody see the whole
controlling,
pizza. Not trying to
for you to like me,
Just not forcing any slice of the pizza, but also not hiding any slice of the pizza.
And I've done that. I did that as a kid. It's a really great coping strategy for parents. It's for a stressful house. It's great. You can be the peacekeeper here and the deviant over here, and you do well in school that way. The church really rewards it as well. And I did it in romantic relationships, like just trying to make sure I was liked.
But then you're putting up a piece of you that's not near the whole you.
And it actually blocks you from real intimacy,
Exactly. So they're both of you are trying to be what they think the other one wants, and neither of you are being authentic. And then you have this like two facades trying to have a relationship.
Feeling really lonely.
And two people standing back and saying, why doesn't it feel good?
I know that one.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community. So a couple things I'd like to dig into that I'm really curious about.
Let's go.
And you said that the things are connected. Let's start with the divorce.
I
mean, especially coming from, I'm going to say, I don't know what's the right way to say a conservative Christian, but deep Christian values. Right? And then getting divorced. How did you reconcile that? And how did you what was the process like for you to make the decision that, or maybe it was your wife's decision, I don't know. But how did you reconcile that for yourself?
It was deeply painful. Deeply, still. I still hate it. Needed to happen, but hate it.
But say more about that, because I think there are things that need to happen, even though they're really difficult.
I just to tee it up, like, I was engaged at 21. I was married at 22. She was 19 or 18 when we got engaged, 19 when we got married. Maybe 18. 18
so years young.
We were young.
Both of you are really young.
We were young, at least by today's standards. We met in the context of our faith in church. We were worship leaders together. So, and we're planning a very missional life. And we're very zealous. We had a lot of zeal. And we grew up in a very charismatic, demonstrative type Christian tradition. So it was very heart forward, extremely emotional, lots of intense feelings that
lots of expression.
And in that context, you actually associate those feelings with God himself, the Spirit moving, and it can get a little confusing. There's a lot of intensity. And I'm a romantic. I'm a big empath feeler. So I love all that. So the marriage was all in that shroud of connection, God, purpose,
right? Yeah.
Family building, and
that's all good stuff.
And, amazing. Yeah. And also, I was in a context where, like, to me, and part of this is just like the sexual repression of some of those traditions. Marriage was also this outlet.
Yeah, it's the only place you could have sex. As
right,
well. Yeah.
For sure. And so there was this deep intimacy around that.
Right.
And divorce was just literally, I couldn't tell you a thing I feared more. If you would have asked,
so that would have been the ninth slice of the pizza.
Yeah, if you would have asked 21-year-old Jack, the one thing he would just pray to God would never happen in his life, it would be, I never want to get divorced. Wow. Like, it would just wreck me. And wreck me it did when it came.
And you were 29 or 30, if I remember right.
It was a process, but 29 when we split.
So why did it, 21, it was the worst thing you could imagine.
Yeah.
Now it's still really painful and sucks, and yet it needed to happen. Why did it need to happen?
We were reenacting patterns that were just detrimental to me and to her. We were hurting each other. I remember at a certain point, I told myself, I'm the problem now. Like, the fact that I cannot leave, I should have left way sooner than I did, right? Okay. Or we should have ended it.
Right.
But I couldn't.
Right. Because of this identity
and complete fear.
Right. Right.
Just the inner torment that I was going to have to feel. I knew that would come.
Yeah.
Because I'm a sensitive person. Yeah. So I just knew it was going to wreck me.
Yeah. So you have this fear, fear of how it's going to feel, but also a fear of separation from the identity. If this was the worst thing you could imagine, that's because your identity was.
And then all the practicals, we're young and I'm an entrepreneur and we have 2 incomes and we live in this city where there's no family. So what does that mean? Just loneliness. All of lots of reasons why it was going to be bad. And I was in so much counseling. I'll never forget at the time I was in church and Father Thomas McKenzie was my spiritual director at the time. I was deeply looking for God to bail me out of this one. I was deeply looking.
What would that have looked like for you?
It would have looked like some kind of message from God, whether through a spiritual director or some dramatic, miraculous experience, to tell me what to do.
Okay.
Because, and this was an issue I had to deal with. I actually don't want to take ownership for this decision.
Okay. So you want God to do it, or your wife to do it, or whatever.
If I knew God wanted me to stay, I was in a situation where I couldn't decide whether to stay or leave. Right. And my hope was, if I could get a clear answer from God, I can have the inner fortitude to withstand whatever the consequences are of whatever decision. And Thomas, one of the most meaningful moments in my life, told me, as a representative of the church, you have the right to do either one. And I hated that answer. I wanted the church to dogmatically tell me. And he said, you have the right to do either one, and you have to choose. And God invites you to choose here. And you're not going to be condemned either way.
Right.
And so all of this is like, he's essentially giving me agency.
Right.
And I'm hating every second of it.
That's something else you needed but hated.
And I needed it. Yeah. And he said, you can choose either one, but what you can't do is make a choice and then be mad at God for the consequences of that choice.
Right.
The consequences either way. And there's beautiful reasons to do each. Right. But essentially melted down, the message was, you need to decide.
Yeah. And if you had let God decide, if God had given you, if a brick had fallen from the sky and hit you on the head, then you could have been mad at God later about it.
Exactly.
Right? Whichever way.
Exactly.
It was, right?
I wanted some directive, because really what I was avoiding was owning my shit and having agency of my life and not being a victim.
Yeah.
And those are all the things that transformed in me after that experience.
So that, we were talking about the red thread. Is that the red thread?
Yes.
About this taking agency, like moving from victim to agent in your life to some sort of empowered. I mean, I feel like my theory is always like a co-creation dance with God, or maybe we were being danced by God. But there's definitely a part that we have to play.
Yeah.
And so would that be like, because, the things you talked about was divorce, and it was definitely your physical fitness and shape, health.
Yeah.
Were 2 big things that changed roughly in the same time.
Yeah. I mean, the divorce was a catalyst to help that process as well. But that is the red thread. It took me 20 minutes to get here.
Yeah, no, but that's okay. But that's what conversations are for.
You helped me discover it. It's it's manifesting now in I want to see what I'm capable of, like I started.
Right.
But it's because of the breakthrough I've had of realizing my own agency in my life. And
what does that feel like to you right now? Like when you say I'm realizing my own agency, like what does having agency in your life mean to you right now, Zach?
It gives me, there's freedom connected to that. There's power connected to that. There's confidence related to that. And there's a sense of, I belong, of belonging, right? I'm able to put a dent on the world too.
How does that, I'm just thinking about that. You say, because agency isn't something I usually think about with belonging. So how is that agency and belonging? How does that go together for you?
I think I'm connecting the idea of personal agency of I can make my own way with, well, everyone else does, so can I. Therefore, I'm one of the tribe. Also a human.
Okay. Not somehow less than.
I also don't have to apologize to everyone when I bump into them around the Home Depot corner. I deserve to be here too, and I deserve to stand up straight, and I deserve to like ask for what I want and try and go for my goals.
But that's really beautiful that you see that as a sense of belonging instead of fear, like a lot of people would, as a sense of separation. You know, like the biggest regret that people have when they die is that they didn't live their life. They lived their life of somebody else. That somebody else wanted them to live.
Yeah.
And why do we do that? Because of belonging. We're social creatures. We want to belong.
Yes.
And therefore we don't do what, I'm going to say it this way, God put us here to do, what's in our heart to do, because we don't want to upset somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful that you have transmuted that, turned it inside out to how I belong is by living my life. Is by showing up and having agency in my life, because that's what healthy people do. And then I belong to healthy society by transmuting that. That's really cool.
That's a cool way to think about it. I'm still a youngin' in this process.
Right.
It's very new to me. I have a lot more history of not being like having these values than I do of having them. And I'm excited to see how the story unfolds over another decade or two or three, and where God will take me in that. But I feel like I've got vigor now in a way I didn't in my 20s.
Yeah.
I've got, I feel grateful for the energy of you and the energy of friends and I see myself as one among equals, people I respect.
Yeah.
And
when did that shift?
I don't know. I just looked up one day and it was different.
Right.
I think it happened over a long period of time.
Sure. So it takes probably 4 or 5 years before you recognize. But if you go back to, like, is there a time if you run the camera back where you say, ooh, there I didn't have it?
I'd say there's a men's community I'm a part of, right? Based here in Nashville that helped me like have a demarcation line.
Right.
Of like, you can leave behind this isolating lifestyle you've done, and you can choose to open yourself to community.
To be authentic and to be vulnerable and to be strong in that space.
And it was a safe space to experiment. I felt like I had Bambi legs, just figuring it out for a year or two.
Right. And when did you come through that?
2019.
2019. So I knew it was after me. I went through that in 2018.
Yeah.
So you came through a year later.
Yeah, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
And that would be like the initial kickoff.
Okay.
And that started bleeding over into the rest of my life. It started bleeding over into the other relationships with friends that maybe aren't in the men's community, but they are.
Because you had the courage to show up, to be authentic, to have agency in your life, to ask for what you want, if I put those words in your mouth.
Yeah, and there's something to like having a safe place where you know you're loved and accepted as you are.
Yeah.
Well, that gives you the boldness to go try it somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's right.
That's at least you've got a
cave to go back to if you have to, right?
Exactly. And I'm practical like that. I think having some kind of support system behind me empowered me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still learning to benefit from that.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole balance of the human condition is we want to belong and we want to create. We want to be ourselves at the same time. And I would say the most authentic community is one that promotes both, right? Where I can love you completely regardless of what your expression is of how you're creating in life.
Yes.
Right. A lot of our formative times, our families and our communities where we grow up, we feel like, I'm not saying it's always the case, we feel like it's not okay for us to show up a certain way.
Yeah.
Because we won't belong. Right. And there was somewhere I mentioned earlier about the 50th birthday party for me, and it was earlier than that, but it was 100% by then that I was like, I know my siblings and my cousins and my wife, like the ones I'm really close to, there's like 10 of us. Doesn't matter, fuck all what happens. They're in my corner, 100%.
Yeah.
You know, if I killed somebody, like for no good reason, they'd still be in my corner.
And that amount of safety just girds you up, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And to understand that and to feel that and to live in that sense of belonging, and that doesn't have anything to do with political beliefs or, you know, and some of them, it's not even blood. Right. It's just like this choice that we're together on this journey, and to see that and feel that,
there's nothing like it, right?
Yeah.
Like I think men, or I should just speak for myself, this deep longing for unconditional love.
Absolutely.
And it sounds trite, but
it's the deepest thing there is.
It is God, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually an earlier version of myself really was believing in that, but like didn't see all the nuance of like, there's actually a lot of ways people aren't loving unconditionally.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And then I became...
Even with the best intentions.
Exactly.
Just because they don't know how. Right?
Don't know how. And a lot of human relationships, depending on what way they're structured, there's incentives.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and those things can start to take away from the purity of unconditional love, right? I'd say even romantic relationships are like this, because I believe the best romantic relationships do have unconditional love, but often...
I'll love you if you're with me.
There's all kinds of unspoken conditions. No one's going to say them out loud, but there's this, you know, I'll love you until...
Right, you have an affair.
This line.
Or whatever it is.
Or that is. Or it's wrapped in providing, or wrapped in emotional security, or you taking care of yourself a certain way.
What do you feel like is the answer for that, or the shift away from that?
I'd say like the unconditional love is a spectrum. Let's say like 100% this way is like true unconditional love, and then there's everything down. I'm viewing it less like black and white, and more like, of
course it's not.
We're just headed towards that as much as possible. And the more relationships can have less incentive structures, the easier it is to float that way. I think like you and I, right?
Yep.
You're one of my deepest friends. I would consider us very far that way. Probably not 100%.
Right.
Like if I come and I spit on your house and like...
the house wouldn't bother me. If you spit on me,
something, there's going to be lines. But we could benefit each other in lots of ways, financially, professionally.
But we don't need any of that.
But we don't need it. Yeah. And that's the key.
That makes us real friends instead of deal friends. Arthur Brooks talks about the difference between real friends and deal friends.
I don't need you.
That's right.
Right.
And that gives us the freedom of just being friends.
And that's the blessing and benefit of also building up yourself.
That's right.
Because you can come fully overflowing to any future relationship, right? Yeah. Mentor, mentee,
Absolutely.
Friends, romantic partners, business partners. I think that's like the spirit of what Jesus was saying, like, don't be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, I always heard that as like make sure you marry a Christian. And like maybe, but also come to any relationship fully working on yourself 100% and not trying to get that last 50 from your partner.
Yeah, not trying to be like, most of us show up in relationships looking for the other part to fix us. Yeah. Like we feel incomplete.
Yeah.
And we want to meet somebody who's going to complete us.
Yeah, like every time we have lunch at Urban Market, you and I, one of us is going to cry.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It is that way.
It's because I think if it feels to me, my perception of our relationship is we get to come unload, share, be seen, and something in each other resounds.
Yeah.
Something you say touches me, or vice versa, or we get to share pain or joy or triumph.
And there's no expectation. Like I don't need anything from you.
I don't either. Right? Like and like you could dissect that in the most cynical way if you want and find something we want from each other. You could do that with every human relationship, but I find that way of looking at the world really dark.
Yeah.
And I've done it. Like it's very nihilistic. It's incredibly cynical. And sometimes I still think like that, but on my better days, my better demons, let me believe that there is such a thing as true unconditional love. And I think,
and there's two things that I want to bring up, and you pulled it out. But one, I'll start with the one that you started to pull out. You said if you take care of yourself, then you have something more to bring to the relationship. And I asked you earlier, like, what is the key to unconditional love? And I can tell you from my experience, it's loving yourself.
Yeah, that makes perfect.
And that's what you were saying. You build yourself up, right? Yeah. So if I don't have something to love with, and then I can't love others unconditionally. I always need something, right? And the most poignant and horrible and wonderful and heart-wrenching example I have of that in my own life is my own children. There was a point where I realized that I wanted them to be a certain way, not for their own good, but for the way that it made me look, for the way it fit the picture of my life. Like somehow they were like accessories to my life instead of their own human being that I have a privilege to serve for a little while.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, because I didn't love myself enough. I needed something from them. I needed them to be okay for me to get approval from the world. Right?
Yes.
And my definition of okay, or even the world's definition of okay. So if we build ourselves up, if we're enough, if we love ourselves, then we have something to give from. And then we can have unconditional love because we don't need the other. And back to what you talked about, what Jesus said, see, to me, people ask about like, what's the core of Christianity or what's the least you can do to be Christian? We have these kind of conversations and I'm maybe pretty far to one side. So I think about that. But to me, that's exactly the whole message of Christianity, right? Love God. Okay. Connect with this magical energy that created the whole universe.
Yeah.
Love God. And then after that, people say, then love your neighbor. But that's actually not what Jesus said. One, he said, love your enemy, if you take the direct translation, or love the other. It's not your neighbor. And how do you do it? As yourself.
Yeah.
So the second step is actually first love God, connect to all of what love is, and then use that to love yourself.
Yeah. Right.
And then from that, then love your enemy, love everybody else.
And maybe you're identifying another way to say the red thread of all my transitions. The transition from not loving yourself to loving yourself. Yeah. And like in my 20s, I was deeply unhappy with myself. I did not like myself. And I showed up to my marriage, to my work, to my spirituality from this place of deficit.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it was as if God used all that and a painful demarcation line to say, okay, if we're going to start from the ground up and reconstruct a life where you love yourself, let's start here, right? And maybe it's going to start in the gym,
right?
For me, that's where it started, right?
So what did that look like? I mean, I know, and I'm really curious about that because it's something I struggle with all the time, staying in shape, and my son struggles with a lot. What shifted for you? How did you transmute love for yourself into being healthy?
I'd love to say it started thoughtful and beautiful with good intentions. It really started with, I'm feeling crazy and in pain, and I have to alleviate this pain.
Right. Okay.
So there was no pure, thoughtful motive. It was, I compare it as like, and some of it was like, I'm going to get the revenge bod, classic divorce stuff. Right. And it's like feeding a sports car with really shitty fuel, you know, and that's what that was. I had a lot of shitty fuel to work with, and so I used it. But over time, that transformed into me learning all these just subconscious little lessons of I can break through something that I didn't think I could break through, or I'm not a victim to being trapped in a body I don't like. Right. And I have agency to start altering this. And every day I'm taking a small action over a long course of time that reinforces that I'm valuable to myself and I want to invest in myself. Right. And slowly it just transformed over, like, I didn't really care about revenge bod, and I didn't really care about, like, the mental.
It was good that was good to help you get started. Actually.
Pain is a great motivator.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know a better one.
Have big shifts around deep pain.
Yeah. But eventually that pain, that dirty fuel wears off, and it's not sustainable for me. Like, eventually you're going to hurt yourself that way. But eventually I fell in love with, I like being the kind of person that's honoring my word to myself. I'm telling myself I'm going to do this. And there's days where I don't, but I push through. And it just, over time, like the same action, over time, eventually transform me into, I'm someone who does hard things. Therefore, I am capable of doing hard things. I admire people who do hard things. I admire myself. And it was the beginning of these really basic, fundamental, I'm not even in the best shape, but I try and stay active, but it's more for just the commitment to, this is one thing I can do that grounds me
Right.
It is like it's a moment to say, I'm worth existing and I'm worth taking care of and I'm worth investing in.
Right.
Instead of trying to do everything for everyone else.
So that was a way of loving yourself.
It was.
Right.
It was.
And then as you said, that compounds.
100%.
You do more, you see more, you like yourself. I can remember, and I can't put a time on it, but it was in the last 5 years, once I started my real recovery as well. But like when I look in the mirror now, and it doesn't matter, like I'm a little fat right now, it doesn't matter. When I look in the mirror, I have a spontaneous smile.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I mean, it's really, even if I'm feeling down, like when I see myself in the mirror, I'm like, wow. And it's so different than the paradigm. Like when I was, in my 20s, I could have been much more fit. Sometimes I was in my 20s, sometimes I was not in my 20s. But I could be much better looking than I am now. But I didn't appreciate it. I didn't, and I would look in the mirror and I would, look, my ears stick out too much and I have a big nose and my hair is all, I had all this critic. And now, and even if I'm feeling really down, I walk by a mirror and I smile. I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Look at that dude.
I'm not fully there. I hope to get there. Like but it did start of like, I just hate the way I look. I was 100 pounds more than I weigh now. I was a big boy. And I just had, and for years, like all of my 20s and my teens, I was insecure about my weight.
Sure.
I was always the chubby kid.
Yeah. And
I had tried diets, and add insult to injury, my mom and dad were professional bodybuilders.
Oh, wow.
So I just had all this body image stuff that I still am like unpacking.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
But it transitioned at some point. I couldn't tell you what day, but at some point it transitioned from I hate myself and I want to change it to this feels good for me, and whenever that happened, it became sustainable.
And was that, I mean, roughly, I know you don't remember the day, but like, was it 6 months into the process of going to the gym most days, or was it a year or 2 years?
I'd say about a year.
About a year. So you get divorced, you decide you have a lot of pain. This is a way you're going to work out the pain, is go to the gym.
Yeah.
And then somewhere around a year later, plus minus a couple months, you thought, wait a minute, I actually like this. This is not
I think I had one, I probably at some point I had a day where I didn't go to the gym and I was like, I feel I missed something.
Right.
And
so then it became a positive, not a punishment, or not something you have to do because you're making yourself better, but something you enjoy
became a way. It became a way of like, this is something that grounds me and is good for me.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. If we come sort of full circle, this red thread that we asked about, because you had all these transitions and you've been through a ton, but they were all around the same time. And the red thread you said now is maybe starting to love yourself, like starting to take care of yourself, starting to, the word you used at the end as you came back to, I admire myself.
Yeah.
Right. You would go through these different steps and you admire yourself. What have you learned? Like, what's been your biggest takeaway from that? If that was your transition from, I'm going to call it, I'm going to put the words in your mouth, you tell me if it doesn't fit, shame to loving yourself.
Yeah.
Of course, on a scale. But
yeah.
With that transition of going from shame to loving yourself, belonging with you, what's the biggest thing that you've learned from that?
If I could go back and talk to the version of myself, and I had like literally one sentence, I would just want to empower him and say, you are capable of more than you imagine. And if only you can believe.
Yeah, I was saying, how would you get him to believe that?
I don't know. I think that may be a little of the mystic of how God works. It's like, when God sets up that timing, I can't make anyone believe that, but I know it now.
Right.
I know it like I know gravity. Like I know all humans are deeply capable of more than they think.
Yeah.
And they're not alone in it. I believe, this little woo-woo, whatever, I believe God is conspiring with them to achieve those things. But he's kind enough to let you find it in yourself so that you have the self-love and the self-respect. Mm-hmm. And that thread of like, you are capable and not therefore, but you are also loved as you are.
Right.
Like,
right. You're enough as you are.
You're enough. You're enough.
You belong. You
and those were things I deeply needed.
Yeah.
I was deeply depressed, lots of anxiety, just unhappy, performative. And
so if you look back to that young man, and he doesn't have you to talk to him, but if you could tell him, and you can't whisper wisdom to him like you would just do, right? Mm-hmm. That you can do it. Where would you tell him to look for that advice? What would you tell him to do to start, to find that for himself? Because, you can't, let's say now you can't go back and talk to him yourself. But if you could, send him a postcard, not with advice, but except where to find the advice or where to find the self. What would you have him start to do? Who would you have him connect with to get that inspiration? Or, what would you offer to that young man of yours and the ones listening right now?
Yeah. There's multiple places where that can come from for different folks. People are wired different.
Sure.
They need different incentives and different motivators. I think if you can be brave enough to be silent, a lot of it's already there.
When you say silence, like something like meditation or mindfulness or being in nature.
Yeah.
But not having the machine running.
Turn off the phone.
Turn off the TV.
Yeah.
Go for a walk.
Spend some regular time, whether it's you have a prayer tradition or meditation, or I think for me, journaling is one of the most, I often don't know what I think.
Right. Yeah.
Until I either speak it or write it.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always felt like I'm a flurry of emotion and thought. I just have a lot going on internally all the time. So it needs to disentangle, right? But once it disentangles, I'll see it written or spoken. I'll be like, that's that's true. There's just something that hits different when you say that thing that's true.
So the first thing is having some silence, creating some space.
Yeah.
Whether it's through journaling or meditation or prayer or time in nature, but without distraction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where you can start to let your thoughts disentangle.
Yeah.
To use your words. And you can start to see a little bit better picture of who you are.
Yeah. I forgot the old quote, but the thoughts disentangle themselves over the lips and through pencil tips.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that, but I definitely relate to it. Yeah. And sometimes I do a lot of journaling now, every day. I do audio journaling every day. I do written journaling most days also. And I feel like it's a lot of times it's how I also can hear directly from God.
Yeah.
Right. That I can write a question and then write the answer and then read it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful as well.
I think the other thing too, Art, for like the younger version of me or other people in that space is like resist the desire to watch a podcast and think one guy's got all the, there's a right or wrong way.
Right.
I would just say, fucking live, bro.
Right.
Go try everything.
Right.
Fall in love, get heartbroken, make a bunch of money, lose it all. Like, get in shape, play a sport, like let your competitive juices flow, learn to cook, be an artist, get your spiritual life going. Like that resonates for me. Not everybody's like that, but if I'm speaking to someone like me,
I think everybody is like that. They just don't know it. But this is my question though, Zach.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get started? Right? So somebody's sitting in their dorm room or their apartment and they're on Xbox or they're watching a podcast, they're watching TV. How do they get started?
There's something you're excited about. You should try it.
And how do you know what you're excited about? How do you find that thing that juices you?
I think it's there. Like I may be wrong, but I
think it's there too. But I think it's really hard to find.
Sometimes you got to shut up all the like junk food, you know, and I'm not talking about literal junk food, like the junk food of your phone,
the TV. So it comes back to silence.
Yeah,
like give yourself
because
space.
there's so much stuff in here.
Oh, geez.
There's I mean, you've worked through it for decades, and there's still so much, right? Like there's so much. I feel like the natural human condition has lots of ambition. Yes. And desire for connection.
Yeah. And I want to clarify the ambition, because when I hear the word ambition, I think make a lot of money.
Sure.
But you're talking about all kinds of creativity,
make your
artist,
art, write poetry. Yeah. Like,
but you want
be a woodworker.
Expression. Like you want to express yourself.
Live.
Whatever.
I think just get out there and play with matter. Get out of the world of bits and get into the world of atoms. Right. You know, like play with things, make things, creating.
Create things.
I would like. People have this fallacy, as someone who's in design and in the creative agency space, and I love that world and aesthetics. People have this fallacy that you're either made a creative person or not. They'll just say, I'm not creative. And that is the biggest bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone should be exercising that muscle. It's just like a muscle.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody can be fully happy and alive that is not.
I 100% believe that, bro. Muscle. And I believe that's a great place to start, because as long as you're a consumer only, whether you're buying lots of things in literal consumption
videos on
or
Facebook
watching
or
lots of media, like if you're going to be on there, make some stuff and post it, right? Like be a maker, be someone that contributes and gives, be generative, because in that sense, you're made in the image of God, and God is a generative force, right? So create, and it can be anything. It doesn't have to be fine art.
Exactly.
It could be literally anything. And it could be their own podcast. It could be their own stream. It could be like their graphic design. It could be
or climbing a mountain or whatever, right?
Exactly. It could be like task oriented. There's so much you can do, but like live, you're going to be dead.
Yeah. Life is short.
You're going to be dead.
Yeah. That's another message, I guess, that I think about, 20-year-olds don't think about a lot, but life is really short. It's really short. 53 now for me, and it's so good for me to think about that. Like when I remember that this may be the last time I get to hug my daughter or tuck her in at night before she goes off to university. Or this may be the last time that I get to, I had a couple of mountain bike wrecks in the last decade that have been pretty tough. And thinking, this may be the last time I get to mountain bike. Let's enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right. Life is short, and then to live it. And I think there's two things that come up for me here. One, and I've quoted this a lot recently, so I hope you guys are listening, pay attention. Yeah, I just did the Artist Way.
Oh, man.
Or not again, for the first time. And
how was that for you?
It's great. It's great. The power of journaling in written form. I've been audio journaling for a long time, but the power of free writing for 30 minutes is really amazing at clearing the mind and getting answers to things without trying to.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love that she said in there, this is what I want to bring up, is she said that our creativity is God's gift to us. What we do with it is our gift to God.
Yeah.
And dude, if you're not doing something with it, and I even remember when I was in business school, and I was in my mid-30s, I think, already when I was getting my executive MBA. And I had a conversation with a professor. What should I do? I was thinking about going into, be a professor or something like that. I was unsatisfied with my career. And they said, well, you're not a creative person. And I fully believed that. I was not a creative person. I can I can regurgitate stuff and I can optimize stuff, but I don't have any ideas of my own. Like that's what I thought. The fact is, nobody has 100% ideas of their own. It's always a spin on something else. It's always a trigger for something else. But we all have gifts. We all have creative stuff. And whether it's, like during the Artist Way, like part of mine was, you see over there on the wall, I think it's on the camera, but the Appalachian Trail map. Right? Like through hiking the Appalachian Trail is a creative act.
Yeah.
Right? And I've been spending some of my artist dates watching videos about that and watching movies and seeing how people transform and so forth. So there's all kinds of things, and we all have gifts, and it's our job to tap those.
Yes.
And we'll feel alive, scared, but alive when we are tapping those gifts.
And one addendum I'd add on is you don't have to have an end game for it.
No. There's no result.
The more you start thinking about the strategy to monetize it or grow the audience or whatever, like you're going to get further and further away from just the authentic expression. If you'll just make over and over and over, eventually it's likely there will be some market need that comes to you.
Or you'll...
But let go of that desire. You can do that on other parts of your time, but just have some time that's just to make.
Yeah.
And see how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Like you're doing this now.
Yeah. I mean, right now, this is my gift.
You've got the podcast, but also you've got this group you're constructing.
Yeah.
You're building curriculum and the experience flow of all that. The way you think about what lessons need to be learned in the sequential order to unlock the next step. The way you communicate it. All of that is creativity.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know a way to get quicker to the heart than to make, because it's so vulnerable. It's so
absolutely.
It's terrifying in some ways, in the best way.
Absolutely.
Because it's
what will people think? Will I belong? Will I be loved? Will I be ostracized?
And for it to be rejected is like deep. It can cut deep, right? Because it's like, this came from me. This was my best shot at being authentic, and you didn't like it. But
this comes back to loving yourself.
Exactly.
Right. If you love yourself, two things happen. And this was the second point I was going to make around loving yourself when I made that one point. The second one about relationships was Jim Detmer. He talks about moving from codependence, which is the relationship you had with your wife and with your parents, we all do to some extent, to co-committed relationships. So you're committed to yourself and you're committed to the relationship, but not you're not looking for the other person to make you happy or make you okay. So if you're creating something and you're putting it out there and somebody doesn't like it and you feel bad, that's a codependent relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a great definition of it.
And then if it's co-committed, like, hey, I'm committed to my art and I know a lot of people aren't going to like it. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody will really like it and maybe I'll just really like the process.
For sure.
When I started doing Friday Reflections, which I'm going to end now, which I'm a little bit scared of ending because I've been doing it 2 years every week. But the main reason I've realized maybe, 20 or 30 writings in, the main reason was just to get over the fear of putting stuff out there.
Yes.
Right? Just writing something and posting it in public every week.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't mean it's going to be good. I mean, when I published my book, we published the wrong version. And I had this book lunch party and all these people and selling all these books. And then I realized when I was reading it at the party,
they had published the wrong version.
They had published the wrong version.
Oh my God, bro.
I mean, so there's a lot of this wrong version book out there. It's awful. I mean, it's like missing stuff and hanging sentences, and it's like, it's really bad, right?
But you're publishing.
Yeah, but I published. I put it out there. Right? It's never going to be perfect. So I fixed it, got the right version, did second printing, and then I'm reading it for Audible. And then I realized there's still mistakes, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it, right?
Yeah, bro.
But to keep going, to put it out there, you know? And there's all kinds of, there's all kinds of creative things. But I love what you said, because one of my biggest struggles has been how to find what it is that juices me. But your point about create some space, somehow create some silence, create some space, I think is a great advice for anybody.
Yeah.
To be able to tap into that and then follow what juices you. Instead of,
try stuff.
It doesn't have to be your whole life, but try stuff.
Try stuff.
Go for it. Fall down, bruise your leg, break your arm. It's okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's really okay. One of the things I talk with a lot in my family is don't ever stop living for fear of dying because you're already dead.
Yeah.
Right?
And bro, you are such an example of this. Like, I mean, you live hard. I love that about you. It's like one of the things when I first met you, I was like, I want to be like that guy. Like, you're doing it all. I mean, and you've got this broad swath of experiences.
Yeah.
You're well-traveled, well-cultured. You've been to the tops of building businesses. You've been in the trenches of starting your own thing. You've lost and made lots of money. You've done the whole, you've written a book, you've made a podcast, you've dove into your spiritual life and built a spiritual community. Like you run triathlons, like you're like a savage in the best way.
Last time I saw you, I did rim to rim to rim.
I know, you told me you were doing that. You're unstoppable. And I love that. Like one thing they won't be able to say whenever your time comes to meet the man upstairs is that he didn't do much,
Yeah, and I think the big journey for me the last 5 years is realizing that there's not something that's better than the other, right? Like I always thought it was about business and being a CEO and making $1 million a year minimum, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what defines who you are. It actually doesn't, and that's not very creative. And maybe if for some people that's great. If that's your thing, go do it, and do it till you're 90. Look at the Hugo Boss founder. I can't think of his name right now. Just turned 90, right? Warren Buffett's 94, and both of them say, "Hey, doing work in a healthy way, what I'm passionate about, keeps me alive."
Yeah,
right, and not just alive, but sharp and vibrant and fit and all of it, right?
Yeah.
but don't do something because you think you should.
Yeah, bro.
Right? That's the whole thing. And it's maybe not possible to skip that completely when you're 20 years old. But my mistake was climbing up the mountain. And I realized at the top of the mountain, or almost at the top of the mountain, this was not the mountain for me. But I was too embarrassed. Like I thought like I was defined by how high, what my altitude was. So in order to climb a different mountain, I'd have to walk back down. And that was simply unacceptable.
In other people's eyes.
In my own eyes.
Yeah.
Because of what I thought other people would think.
Right.
But also my own, right? There was a part of me that thought I was unacceptable if I wasn't performing at this super high level of business all the time.
Right.
And
so maybe you had a very narrow view of what that amazing full life was.
Absolutely.
Instead of a broader
even though I wanted to. I mean, I moved to other countries, not for business benefit, because I was curious. Yeah. I did it with business.
Yeah.
And it helped my business career tremendously. There's no doubt. I mean, probably my funnest job was when I lived in China, and definitely biggest from the amount of P&L and employees and stuff that I had was when I was president of Autoliv in China. But those things were done from a curiosity standpoint, not specifically for business. I love that about you. And then they benefited business.
I got to say this for your podcast, because you gave me probably in my top 5 pieces of advice ever.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Do tell.
it was something I really needed to hear. We were talking about the progression of like a young man's life, right? And we were talking about your journey into this midlife transition. And you were telling me kind of, a lot of men or women, you go and you strive, achieve. And then you get there and there's this kind of like, and this what's next moment, right? Yeah. And I expressed to you frustration about being 34 and feeling like I'm on my way up that mountain, right? And I've often heard advice from folks that have hit the top saying, hey, this isn't where you're going to be fulfilled. And the subtle
hint is that you should stop climbing the mountain.
Exactly. It's like, so don't waste your time doing it. But you just so wonderfully were like, no, you have to go do it.
Yeah, you have to do it. It's part of the journey. You have
to do it. And it just gave me peace, man, because I know intellectually that the top of whatever my career or creative work will not be the thing that makes that whole feel fulfilled. Right. I know it intellectually, but I don't know it experientially, so I almost don't 100% believe it.
Yeah, although so you got to go out and chase it. Yeah.
So but I would get frustrated because what's the alternative? I just sign up for the monastic life early.
Yeah, but that's not
that's not fulfilling to me.
Ecclesiastes, right?
The time for everything there is a season, and you gave me permission and said, you should go
kill the world.
Go get everything in your heart.
Yeah.
Go do it.
Yeah.
And then I also just appreciate so much that there's almost this. Something you didn't say, but you did say in a way is like there's a safe place when you decide to change course.
Yeah, that's right.
You're providing
there's
that.
People farther down the path, and
you're providing that here, and I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I really appreciate that. I didn't know, but thank you for sharing that with me. And Zach, I really appreciate the concrete tools that you've given to people of any age that stop and make some space so that you can see what it is you love, and do a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And as that compounds, you also learn to love yourself and see that you can do things and that you're the kind of person that you want to be.
Yeah.
And that keeps building on itself. And then you get a transformation.
Yeah.
So I love that. One last question. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to connect with you, Zach, what's the way for them to do that?
I have a website. It's kind of a landing page for all my different endeavors. Okay. And my email's on there. You just Zach, ZACH .earth, EARTH. So not the Zach on Mars or Saturn or Jupiter.
Zach.earth. That's cool.
www.zach.earth. You can contact me there.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share with our listeners before we wrap up today?
I think why expound? I feel like this has been a great moment. So thank you.
Well, Zach, I appreciate you coming. It's been wonderful being here with you and hearing your wisdom, which you have a lot of already. And I know it's going to be a real benefit to all of our listeners. And I've got one particular in mind. So thank you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Love you.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.